people. And before we get going on our hearing, I'm just going to make a couple of announcements. I needed to make a calendar change for Friday. We are moving the roundtable off of Friday, and we will not be meeting on Friday. And I am attempting to hope that we can reschedule that roundtable for Wednesday, March 12th on accreditation. And it looks like we're trying to make sure we get the audio in the other room. You're just missing announcements right now. I will make sure we get audio, so thank you for letting us know. I'm sorry? Can you hear me now? Nat, is there a reason the technology might not be working? Do we need to check any of the light switches on the wall? Because I know they get bumped easily. No, that's the button that holds open the door. Can you guys hear me now? A little better. Holding room, you can't hear. But then we block the view of the people in that front row. All right, Nat will keep working on it. What I'm going to let us do is prop the door open, but not all the way that we crush the people behind the door. And hopefully that will help. Thank you, Representative Hill. All right, so we were just making announcements, and then we'll all be extra loud and see if that helps. So no meeting on Friday, and next week's calendar should be getting posted very shortly. And with that, I'm going to move right into the hearing because I'd like to allow as much time for our speakers as we have. And I think that we are a committee that from time to time deals with issues that are very complicated. They're things that people are very passionate about. But this committee has a really wonderful track record of having a very respectful conversation, because there's a couple of things that I think that we do, and why I'm proud of every single member of my committee is we make sure that we maintain a good tone. We smile. We ask thoughtful questions. And it's important that we have this time for discussion, because the basic set of rules that we use in running the Capitol are something called Mason's Manual. And Mason's talks about the importance of discussion and having as much information as possible as we can have. So part of our rules include that we don't have things like signs, clapping, phones going off, and so forth, so that we maintain good decorum and dedicate as much time as possible to hearing testimony and asking questions. And today is one of the days where I have 13 people who submitted testimony. So I have 3 minutes for each person who's speaking. And I'm going to ask you to follow not only these rules, but all of our rules. And that's an expectation I have of every single committee member and every conferee, no matter what side of the bill they are. So one of my first rules is obeying the time limit. And when the buzzer goes off, you are done. We don't finish the sentence we are on or anything like that. And I am going to be the exception to the phone rule, because so that you can hear the buzzer and you can see the time, I'm going to use my phone, but you won't hear the buzzer if my phone isn't on. So I apologize now if my phone should accidentally ring. It will turn orange when you get down to 30 seconds, and then it will go red if you hit. And I find most people like having a timer because it helps you manage your time. There are a few people where a timer makes you nervous, and if you would rather not see the timer when you come to the podium, you're free to let me know. I would really like for you to be comfortable, and I won't show the timer. The other thing that we do, so that is one of our biggest rules. And I think the other thing that's important to us, along with managing our time and our decorum, is that we never make anything personal here. We recognize that we all have deeply held beliefs that really matter to us a lot, and all of our decorum and the words that we choose to use should reflect that. So I'm going to begin by having our reviser explain the bill to the committee. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Senate Bill 76 would enact the Given Name Act regarding the use of pronouns and proper names of students in school districts and at post-secondary educational institutions. The first part of the bill on page 1, line 24, would prohibit employees of school districts from addressing a minor student by a pronoun that is inconsistent with the minor's biological sex or by a name other than the name listed on the student's birth certificate or a derivative of that name without obtaining the written permission of the student's parents prior to using such pronouns or names. Additionally, then in subsection C, no employee of a school district would be subject to adverse employment action for declining to address an individual by a pronoun or title that is inconsistent with their biological sex or a name that is inconsistent with the individual's birth certificate. Similarly, there are provisions in the bill that state that no student is to be subject to disciplinary action for refusing to use a pronoun or name that is inconsistent with an individual's biological sex or the name on their birth certificate. And those particular provisions with respect to disciplinary action would apply at the post-secondary level as well as the K through 12 level. The bill does provide a statutory cause of action for any person who is aggrieved by a violation of the Given Name Act to bring a lawsuit against the school district, post-secondary educational institution, or the individual employee who violated the act to seek injunctive relief or monetary damages, and that includes reasonable attorney's fees. The bill does provide some relevant definitions on page 2 of the bill. You can see those. The Senate Committee on Education amended the bill in subsection B so that the prohibitions on the use of a pronoun or name without written parental permission only applied to a minor student and only in the K-12 setting. They struck out the post-secondary education references in that subsection. The bill did pass the Senate on a final vote of 26-14. It would go into effect this July 1st and therefore would be in effect for the 25-26 school year. And with that, Madam Chair, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Jason. Any questions for our reviser? Representative Ruiz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just kind of, as I read through this bill, I see a lot of whereases and therefores. Why is this a bill and not a resolution of some sort?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, sometimes there is preamble language attached to a bill at the request of the legislator who requests the bill. In those cases, we do have whereas clauses and a now therefore before we get into the actual substantive part of the bill. That language never is printed in the official statute books. We only print the actual law after the be it enacted clause, but that's not, while not common, it's not unusual to have whereas clauses in a piece of substantive legislation.
Thank you. And Nat, thank you. I can tell the audio problem is being addressed. I appreciate everybody's efforts on making that happen. Anybody else with questions for Jason? Representative Featherston?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have just a couple questions about the drafting. Post-secondary educational institution is crossed out in lines 24 and 25, but occurs elsewhere. Why?
Yes, Madam Chair, that was the amendment made by the Senate Committee on Education. And so they took out the post-secondary educational institution reference in subsection B so that a post-secondary instructor would not be required to get the written permission of a college student in order to call them by the pronoun or name that they preferred to be called by. However, they are still kept in the provisions of subsection C so that no disciplinary action can be taken against that post-secondary instructor by their administration if they refuse to call another individual by the pronoun or name that doesn't match their biological sex or birth certificate.
Yes, you may.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is there a definition of harm that's standard that's not in this bill?
No, this would fall under more common law in terms of tort harms and any injuries that the plaintiff may have suffered as a result of violation of the statute.
Okay. I have a third, but I'll wait.
If it's for Jason, go ahead.
Okay, third. Students at post-secondary institutes are generally over 18. Do they have First Amendment rights?
Yes.
Any more questions? Seeing none, we will move right on into testimony. And we begin with proponent. And by the way, I like for people to feel comfortable when they go to the podium. Don't feel like as soon as you're walking up, I'm pushing the button. I don't press the button until you say your first word. Opening with proponent testimony, Brittany Jones with Kansas Family Voice. I think she was outside on WebEx waiting for us to call her. Yes, Brittany.
Good afternoon, committee. Chairwoman Estes, members of the committee, my name is Brittany Jones, and I'm the Director of Policy Engagement for Kansas Family Voice. We stand in strong support of SB 76 and the rights of parents and children to protect their names, but as well as for teachers to not be compelled to speak when it violates their beliefs. So unfortunately, we've seen too many instances around Kansas of families who have either had their information about their child hidden from them, or there are instances of teachers in Kansas who have had to sue because their First Amendment rights were violated. This is a simple bill to remedy the situation and ensure that going forward, we don't have lawsuits like these because school boards were able to adopt policies to protect the First Amendment rights of parents and teachers. We do know that school boards have asked for this, administrators have asked for these sorts of bills because they would like clarity. And so I'm going to cover a few points today. I think it's important to note that this is backed up by federal statutes as well as case law. We see frequently that the rights of parents in the school system still exist. And I think we can all agree that they exist. Now, sorting out exactly what that looks like is sometimes the question. But all this bill does is ensure that a parent gives written permission for their child to be called a name that's something different than on their birth certificate. They can decide to be called whatever they want their child to be called, but the parent needs to be involved in that decision. It shouldn't be made by a school administrator or a teacher, even a well-meaning one. A parent needs to be involved in that situation. We also know that teachers' First Amendment rights are still protected. We had a case in Kansas just 2 years ago where a teacher was compelled to speak in a way that violated her First Amendment rights, and the court upheld her right to speak, to not be compelled to speak and to follow her belief system, even in the educational system. And that's not the only instance of this happening, but that is one of the court cases in Kansas that this law is designed to protect against. And then finally, we know that when we separate children from their parents, we create harm to that child. In the long term, alienating a parent and a child does create difficulty for that child. They need that stability of their parent. They need that stability and understanding, especially when they're going through a difficult time. Whatever that might look like, that parent needs to be involved in all of those decisions in order to best protect that child and ensure, in most situations, that
We're out of time.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry, that was the 30-second, my bad.
I will wrap up, though. We believe that this is protected, that this law is upheld by case law as well as federal statutes. We have seen examples in Kansas where this law has been necessary, where parents have had their information hidden from them about their child, as well as teachers' rights have been violated, and we ask that you pass SB 76 favorably. And I stand open for questions at the appropriate time. Thank you.
Representative Featherston.
Thank you. I have two short ones. How many lawsuits do we have from teachers whose deeply held beliefs were violated. And then the second question is, do teachers have the First Amendment right to call children by their chosen name?
Chairwoman Estes, Representative Featherston. We have at least one case of a teacher in Kansas. There are others across the country, and I believe some of the other conferees will address ones from other states. When it comes to the First Amendment rights of teachers, those are very important, and this bill protects those First Amendment rights. However, those First Amendment rights have to work in conjunction with the parents' rights to know what's going on with their child and intimate things about their child, like what their child is being called in school.
Other questions for our conferee? Seeing none, thank you, Ms. Jones.
Thank you.
We will move on to Amy Covey.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm a school board member in Lansing, Kansas at USD 469. I'm here to testify. You all have my written testimony. I just wanted to kind of give you my personal experience with what we have passed as a local policy regarding the statute. When I first came on as a school board member in January of 2022, I was made aware by staff that there was emails that went out to teachers and staff instructing them to keep pronouns or certain names that students had been going by at school from their parents at the upcoming teacher conference. When I found that out, I felt that usurped the parents' right. They should know. They should always be part of that decision. It also abridged the FERPA because those records were being kept one way on the staff and district side and another way on what the parents could view, so that violated FERPA. They have rights to that educational record at all times. So we put forth a policy that if a student would like to go by a different pronoun or sex, that they have to gain parental permission or their guardian permission. And also in that policy, we wrote in that a teacher, staff member, or student may elect to use that preferred pronoun or name, but they are not compelled to. If we compel them to, that would violate their speech. I understand we'd like to keep local control, and some of the arguments are to keep these at a local level for the decisions and not the legislature. But I have found that there are many districts and board members who are not able to get this policy passed. There are employees that are having to follow their district policy. And I believe that when I took an oath as a board member to follow the Constitution, as you all did as representatives, that we need this statute to make sure that they are able to do this. We defend the parents' right to direct the upbringing and education of their children. And we also cannot compel and violate the First Amendment rights of students and staff by compelling them to use a particular pronoun or name that may violate how they believe personally. I believe this has worked out well in our district. We have not had any lawsuits. We have not had any issues. We follow this policy, and I believe it would be best if this is put into statute to protect that. As mentioned by Ms. Jones earlier, there is case law in Kansas. I know part of the argument is there may be lawsuits that come of this, but in fact, there already has been case law settled where a district was forced to absorb monetary losses because they compelled their teacher to use that particular pronoun. So that's about all I have, my personal experience, and you have my testimony. I'll stand for questions if you have any.
Thank you. Do we have questions? Representative Ruiz?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for being here this afternoon. How many incidents have you found this happened in your school district?
In our district, well, when it first occurred, that was one incident that was brought to me, and then I had 3 other incidents brought since then, after we passed the policy. And since we had put that into policy, they have obtained the permission, and then now they can go by that. But again, teachers and staff are not compelled to. And then we also passed a later policy that affirms that in another way with our gender policy, and it states the same thing, because we originally had this listed on our Parents' Bill of Rights, and then we have a separate policy with gender that also specifies it, and it's worked really well.
You're welcome. Any additional questions for the conferee? Seeing, Oh, I'm sorry, Representative Featherston.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What is your personal or your board's opinion on children having the right to feel safe at school?
All children should feel safe at school, and we have a bullying policy. So if a student, if you're I don't want to speak for you, but if you're worried about a child being bullied by another student by not using their preferred pronoun or name, then that bullying policy takes into effect regardless of what pronoun, name, sex, gender the child is.
Yes, you may.
This is to Mr. Long. Does this bill supersede that policy? It says they can't be no action taken.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, the bill does prohibit discipline action towards a student who refuses to use a name or pronoun that does not match another student's biological sex or the name on the birth certificate. To the extent a school district policy is in direct conflict with that prohibition, there could be a conflict between the policy and the state law, but it would largely come down to the policy as written and the specific facts of the circumstance.
Any other questions? Seeing none, we will move on to our next conferee, Matt Sharp.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Matt Sharp. I serve as Senior Counsel with Alliance Defending Freedom, where our firm represents teachers, students, and countless other Americans standing for their First Amendment right to speak and live the truth. Decades ago, the U.S. Supreme Court recognized that neither students nor teachers lose their First Amendment rights at the schoolhouse gate. And that means teachers and other school employees cannot be forced to deny their own core beliefs or to say things that are untrue to keep their job. That's what happened to Pam Ricard, a math teacher at Fort Riley Middle School in Fort Riley, Kansas. Pam spent decades in education. She always treated her students with the utmost dignity and respect. But Pam knows that an integral part of teaching children is telling them the truth. But the Geary County School District threatened her ability to do that when it told her to use names and pronouns for students that were inconsistent with the student's biological sex. What's more, district policy forced Pam to keep parents in the dark about their children who may be struggling with gender dysphoria. Pam knew she couldn't follow that policy without violating her beliefs, but in April 2021, Fort Riley Middle School suspended Pam for 3 days after she declined to refer to a student by a name and pronouns that were inconsistent with the student's sex. This is just one of many situations, not only here in Kansas, but across the country, where school district officials compel conformity to gender ideology. These are teachers who love their students, but who cannot use names and pronouns that are inconsistent with a student's sex. But the freedom of speech and religion includes the freedom not to endorse messages contrary to our core beliefs. Teachers shouldn't be forced to mislead parents or say things that are untrue just to keep their job. And that's why a growing number of courts are ruling against government officials that force teachers and others to violate their deepest beliefs and to endorse gender ideology just to keep their job. This happened in the case of Peter Vlaming, where the Virginia Supreme Court ruled that teachers cannot be forced to lose their job or say things that are untrue. It happened with Dr. Nicholas Merriweather, a professor at Shawnee State University in Ohio, where the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals there reaffirmed that professors that cannot be forced to say things that they know are untrue. Why? Because words, including pronouns, have meaning. They carry a message with them. For many Americans, that message is that a person has an immutable biological sex that is written into every cell of their body, and pronouns reflect that truth. This bill simply protects the freedom of every student and every teacher to ensure that they are never forced to abandon their beliefs or to say things that violate their understanding of what it means to be male and female. This is protecting that right to free speech, to make sure that no teacher ever loses a job, no student's ever suspended or punished simply for declining to say something that they don't believe is true. Thank you.
Do we have questions for our conferee? Representative Getz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your testimony. So I was just curious around the parents being left out of some of that. Was there kind of documentation of that process, or has there been found a policy for that, or is it kind of a school system or certain school attendance center that just had that culture, and that was, explain a little bit more of that to me.
Thank you. Madam Chair and Representative, What we often see is what are referred to as secret social transition policies. So this is where sometimes it's by policy and sometimes it's by practice, where teachers and other school employees will be told that they cannot share information with parents if a child is wanting to identify as a different gender, wanting to use facilities of the opposite sex. We've even seen it go so far as a case we have in Michigan where school officials were changing records, changing documents before they sent them home, so that the parents had no idea that this was happening at school and the parents were left in the dark. Many teachers are concerned about that. They want to talk with parents. They want to inform parents and make sure parents know what's going on with their child. And so this ensures that teachers are not forced to withhold that information from parents that the teacher believes is important for the parent to know.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Representative Schreiber and then Hubert.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Sharp. My question, you used the term gender ideology a couple of times in your testimony. Could you describe what you believe that is?
Thank you. Madam Chair and Representative, I think there's many ways to approach it, but ultimately it's the idea that a person is born in the wrong body, that their gender does not align with their sex. And again, we are not disputing that there are children and individuals that have gender dysphoria. I know there's lots of discussion about the best way to address that, but this is ultimately boiling down to making sure that parents are aware of that. Parents know what's going on with their child and can make the appropriate decisions about what's best for their child.
So,
You may.
So with ideologies, that's basically something that's taught. Are you saying this is taught then? I'm sorry.
You may
Yep.
respond.
Madam Chair, thank you, Representative. In some cases, yes. We've seen school districts that teach students about this and incorporate it. We've seen it can happen in counseling sessions and other things. And again, what this wants to do is make sure that parents are aware of what's going on, that those that want to be involved and engage in their child's life have that information. But again, just like we don't push other ideologies that's sort of core to our First Amendment values, we don't force someone to agree or express an ideology that violates their core beliefs. That's simply what this is protecting for both students and teachers.
Okay. I disagree with you, but I'd rather use the term gender dysphoria, which is a medical condition. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Representative Hubert?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know there's been several executive orders issued here recently, and even some of those involve federal funds if violated. I didn't know if anything specifically on this topic, but I thought one was global enough that it might follow under the umbrella of that executive order. Are you aware of how that might be playing out, even in regards to those orders and the funds that are attached when violated?
Madam Chair and Representative, yes, there have been some executive orders specifically dealing with this, both from the parental rights angle, but also ensuring that people aren't compelled to speak beliefs or ideas that they disagree with. Obviously, there's going to need to be additional federal government action to implement those regulations and rules. But I think the importance of legislation like this, we know that things can change in 4 years. In fact, we've seen this, one administration to the next, going back and forth. Laws like this make sure that in Kansas, that these protections for free speech are written into code, that they're available to teachers so that no teacher or student ever faces that punishment for not wanting to say something they disagree with.
Representative Featherston?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think this is for Jason. In the testimony, it said, messages contrary to our core beliefs. Is gender legally considered a message?
Jason, you may respond.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, any communication could be in certain contexts considered a message.
Thank you. Did you have a follow-up, Representative? Okay. Any more questions for this conferee? Seeing none, thank you very much. And we will move on to our WebEx conferee, Jonathan Butcher with the Heritage Foundation. Nat, do we see him online? Thank you. You may proceed.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony on behalf of Heritage Action for America. My name is Jonathan Butcher. I'm the Will Skillman Senior Research Fellow in Education at the Heritage Foundation. Educators have a responsibility to inform parents about their child's health while at school, and no one should be sanctioned for acting in good faith to address someone according to their sex. Unfortunately, for many years, some medical professionals and even policymakers promoted a, quote, affirming model of care that accepted a young child's self-diagnosis without questioning whether pursuing hormonal and other physical changes were in that child's best interests. K-12 students are minor-age children, largely, and the Supreme Court made a very accurate observation that children, quote, simply are not able to make sound judgments concerning many decisions, including their need for medical care or treatment. Social affirmation then leads young people through a sequence of decisions that can culminate in off-label hormone treatments and surgical interventions that have irreversible consequences and damaging results. When a child attends school and says he or she was born in the wrong body, this is a health-related issue, even a sign of emotional or mental distress. For these reasons, it is essential for school personnel to include parents in discussions about a child's health. Research has found that so-called gender affirmations do not improve the mental health of patients confused about their sex. In 2024, a comprehensive report from the United Kingdom called the ks report found that the rationale for early puberty suppression remains unclear, with weak evidence regarding the impact on gender dysphoria, mental psychosocial health. The effect on cognitive and psychosexual development remains unknown. These findings have now been supported by 2 new research reports released this year. Children can be confused about their sex, but in 60 to 90% of the cases of children with this confusion, it resolves naturally without interventions as the children complete puberty and enter adulthood. According to the Society for Evidence-Based Gender Medicine, countries across Europe have used findings such as these to either ban or strictly limit so-called gender interventions for minors, including Sweden, Finland, England, Wales, and others. We do not know what, quote, gender medicine is going to do to young people. Students should not be socially affirmed, and no one should be punished for addressing someone in good faith according to their sex. Thank you.
Do we have questions for the conferee? Representative Ruiz?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Sir, what's your background? Are you an attorney, a doctor? What are you?
I'm a policy analyst at the Heritage Foundation, a research organization located in Washington, D.C.
Okay, so if I was to give you a title, what would that be?
Senior fellow.
Thank you.
Any additional questions for our conferee? Seeing none, we will move on. That ends our proponent testimony. That is oral. I have no neutral testimony. So we will move towards opponent oral testimony. And the chair will call to the podium Timothy Graham.
Thank you. You can call me Tim. So you will see in the testimony, as you see in all the testimony that we submit, what our positions are and how we adopt those positions. I encourage you to read that. But let's get right into this bill. And I want to start off with as best of a tone as I can because I'm the first opponent, and I appreciate the chairwoman's appeal for us to be nice today. But I have to say this. This bill is not pro-teacher, okay? So you've heard other conferees say that. This is not a pro-teacher bill, so please understand that. I will also say that K&E stands with the transgender students and educators, and we're not asking all of you to understand what they're going through, but we're asking you to believe them, because we do. And we're just asking you to have those conversations and believe them when they say these types of bills are hurtful. Folks, we have banned transgender students from participating in sports here in Kansas. We have now banned gender-affirming care here in Kansas. And now we're looking at a bill that allows teachers to be sued for pronouns and nicknames. The reason they say that this is needed is because the narrative is that teachers are hiding something from parents. Let me tell you guys something. Teachers aren't hiding things from parents. They are begging parents to get involved in their students' education. They need parents to be involved. Parent-teacher coordination and the parent-teacher relationship is a fundamental tenet of the education profession, and they practice that every single day. Since I have a minute, I'm gonna take it. We've heard about one instance in Kansas that's being referenced When I was a legislative staffer, and many of you knew me in those days, I had a lot darker hair. But one of the things I had to do every Monday morning after these events where legislators came back to the State House was I had to talk them out of making silly decisions based on what they heard at a coffee. I had to talk them out of passing legislation that was based on anecdotal information. One thing is not a reason to change the law. One instance is not a reason to put these teachers who are facing student debt, who are underpaid, and who are in a pension system that does not give them a respectable retirement. That is not a reason to put them in financial jeopardy should they make the wrong move and call somebody by the wrong pronoun. Thank you all for the time. I want to also thank Representative Estes again for her approach, and I'm open for questions.
Questions for our conferee? Well, I will just give a very, oh, I'm sorry, Representative Miller, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you so much for being here, Tim. So it's kind of my understanding, this bill seems to provide protections for teachers and students who don't want to use someone's preferred pronouns. And the argument was made that everyone's First Amendment rights should be protected. By your understanding of this bill, does it provide any protections at all for people who do want to use that student's preferred pronoun?
No, I believe that's why the bill was written, to prohibit that.
Okay, so it does provide privilege or a preference towards one, but not the other.
That's the way I see it.
Okay, thank you. That's my understanding too. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're very welcome. Any other questions for our conferee? Then I will just say thank you for being here with us today, and I enjoyed meeting your member and her students from Salina. We had a very nice visit, so I appreciate you spending time on great advocacy. We will continue to move on. I have Melissa, and I'm so sorry, I think I'm going to mispronounce this, Styler?
I didn't actually sign up for oral testimony, but I'll take it.
You know what, we did have it labeled that we weren't sure if you were oral or written, and I try to give people the benefit of the doubt, so
Thank you.
whatever is your preference.
Thank you so much, Chair Estes. I don't have my notes with me, so I'll keep it pretty brief. My name is Melissa Styler. I am the Advocacy Director for Loud Light and Loud Light Civic Action. Essentially, our problem with this bill is, beyond the kind of harmful impact it could have just on its face, it's written quite poorly. If you look through, and again, I don't have the bill on me right now, but if you look through the actual language of the bill, oh. Thank you. Sure. The bill is nonsense. It's overly broad, it's really sloppily written, it's unenforceable, it's going to lead to the harassment of both students and of teachers. I'll quickly walk through some of my concerns with just it section by section. So in the preamble, the bill claims to be about free speech whenever the bill bans school employees from certain speech. The irony here would be pretty funny if it weren't so harmful. I don't really think that government censorship is much of a laughing matter. So Section 1B, it's unenforceable. A birth certificate isn't even mandatory to attend Kansas schools, and so requiring every staff member of that school to know every contents of a student's birth certificate seems pretty ridiculous whenever you think about it in practical terms. It also violates the student's right to privacy. This private information on one's birth certificate becoming public information is a real concern we have. And this doesn't just apply to trans kids. This applies to all kids. What about if somebody is intersex, which is actually a lot more common than you all would think about? That's not anybody else's business, but this bill would make it so. Additionally, the broad language and unintended consequences haven't been thought out. Like, what about if a football player was just so excellent and they went by a nickname, the Bulldozer, but he didn't have written permission to be called that? The coach could get sued for something like that, which is just ridiculous. And then sections 1C and D protects bullying regardless of parental consent. So you can't really say that this is a parents' rights bill because regardless of what the parents want, you know, what happens whenever a child is getting bullied for this, and then you're not allowed to reprimand that child. Section 1E, the damages clause, is so broad. There's no restrictions for preventing frivolous lawsuits within the bill text, and I know that there's been some discussion that the litigation is narrowly focused, but the thing that you are passing into law is not your intention. It is what is in the bill, and the text is super broad without restrictions here. Lastly, who is this for? Everybody who's testified here is representing some kind of big.
We're out of
national interest.
time. Thank you. Do we have questions for our conferee? Seeing none, we'll move to our next one. Thank you for being with us today. Our next conferee was from KASB. They let me know that they were running late. Is Angela is here. Wonderful. Angela, please come on in. We're glad you made it safely.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Chair Estes, members of the committee. I apologize. I had to come in from the overflow room. My name is Angie Stahlbaumer. I am Deputy Director and General Counsel at the Kansas Association of School Boards, and I'm here representing our members, which consist of school boards throughout the state of Kansas, community colleges, tech colleges, special ed co-ops, and interlocals. Our testimony gets into all of the things that KSB supports, and I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about those points, just to highlight a couple of them. So the first one being that technically the school boards in the state of Kansas are the ones with the constitutional prerogative to enact policy that they think is appropriate to govern the school boards and the school districts in the state. So we would ask this committee keep that in mind in moving forward. Secondly, we do support partnerships with parents, with teachers, with students, and we feel that this in particular may be more a solution looking for a problem than a situation that mends any problem that currently exists. If you look further on down in our testimony, we talk about how we do support, obviously, efforts to improve student well-being in the state of Kansas, and we also try to support or technically do not support legislative efforts that would create conflicts in laws, whether it's conflicts in laws between state law or state and federal law. And so with that in mind, I want you to know that even though we appear in opposition today, I can't tell you that we oppose of all of this legislation, and I want to bring something to your attention. There currently is state statute, and for those of you that really like to nerd out on that stuff, you can go to KSA 38-141, and this is the statute that says that parents will have a cause of action if they don't get, technically they are the authority in making educational decisions and decisions about their child's upbringing in the state of Kansas. So that right already exists. So in that vein, if we look at Section 1B of this bill, it really is redundant with what is already in place, as school districts already work with parents in that way. If we look at 1C and 1D and E, though, I do want to say that these are areas we have concern with. This bill presupposes that a parent will never support changes in name, title, and gender, and we know that not to be the case. It also says that we could not discipline a staff member or a student that didn't respect the choices of the parents in those circumstances. And we know that would put us in a place where we're violating our law against bullying and those types of things. We had other conferees talk about the fact that this.
You are out of time.
Okay, thank you.
I assume that you would like to stand for questions?
Yes, absolutely.
Do we have questions for our conferee, Representative Schreiber?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Ms. Stahlbaumer. In your organization, we heard from one school board member in Lansing that approached this situation a different way than what the bill says. What's been your experience with other school districts across the state? Are they creating other policies, or how is that going?
That's a good question. We don't keep data on what all of our districts are doing. I can tell you some of our district boards have considered more specific policy in this area. I can't tell you that a majority of our districts are doing what's trying to be done here, but I do appreciate boards of education having the opportunity to decide locally what works for them and what works for their students and parents. Thank you.
Any other questions for the conferee? Seeing none, we'll move along. Thank you for being with us today. Elise Flatland. Welcome, Elise. Oh, now I know your name because I always admired your classes. Thank you for being with us today.
All right. Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for your time. My name is Elise Flatland, and I'm a Kansan. I volunteer with Equality Kansas, but I'm also here on behalf of my family. My husband and I have 4 kids, which include 2 transgender kids. I'm opposed to Senate Bill 76. This bill undermines my primary responsibility as a parent to protect my children and ensure that they feel valued and understood. My daughter is an outstanding student with a GPA over 4.0 and a dedicated flute player and a brilliant mathematician. She's a junior in high school and plans to major in math at KU. My son is in 6th grade and just started middle school. He is an artist and musician and the most empathetic friend. He responds to those who try to intimidate and demean him with overwhelming kindness. All of this is threatened by legislation that encourages bullying and harassment. There are many people at the schools that do not know and do not need to know my children's sex assigned at birth and diagnosis of gender dysphoria. That is part of their private medical history. Allowing people to dead name and misgender students isn't just disrespectful, it's a violation. I'm not asking anyone to accept or understand transgender students. I'm asking for all students to be treated with dignity and respect, especially in the spaces where they should feel the safest. This bill creates an environment where transgender children are more vulnerable to harassment and bullying and prevents the school administration from being able to stop it. This bill threatens the emotional well-being of transgender children who are already at a higher risk of depression, anxiety, and even self-harm. This is not a political issue. This is a matter of human dignity. This bill represents another attempt to marginalize and disrespect my family and puts the mental health of my children and children like mine at risk. Transgender people have always existed and will continue to exist.
Would you like to stand for questions? Sure. You don't have to. But,
I don't care.
Overflow room, please remember that we do not display emotion of any kind. If you continue to be disruptive and not honor our decorum, you will be at risk of being asked to leave for trespass. You don't have to take questions, but I always like to offer people the opportunity.
I'm fine. If anyone has questions, that's fine.
Representative Featherston? No. Any questions for our conferee? I'm sorry. I think he thought you... Okay, seeing no questions, thank you for being with us today. Our next is Rashane Hamby. Did I say your name right?
No, it's...
Will you teach me the right way, please?
It's Rashane Hamby.
Rashane, that's beautiful. Thank you for being with us today. You may begin.
I hope that didn't count towards my 3 minutes.
No, I have not pushed the button yet. So go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you, Chairwoman and members of the committee. I had so many brilliant people go before me, so I won't be redundant. I'm going to use this opportunity to walk through scenarios and questions that came up to me as I was reading the bill. As I first read through the bill, I thought about the substitute teacher. So we'll call this scenario 1 with substitute teacher Miss Aaron. So substitute teacher Miss Aaron is possibly subbing in for already underserved, potentially community, understaffed, underfunded school, and now substitute Aaron will be handed a list of names and birth certificates. Doesn't make sense. So if she does not receive the birth certificate, it does not have express permission to call the student by their preferred name. What happens then? This bill doesn't address that. Let's go through scenario 2. we'll call this person Karen. So Karen walks into the school and she overhears a student being called by pronouns. If this person, Karen, is offended or thinks that she is harmed in some way, is she able to bring a lawsuit against the school district? This bill is very vague. We don't know what will happen because it's not written in the way that's clear, and maybe that's on purpose or intentional, and maybe you all actually don't want to help in the First Amendment, but I wanted to highlight that. So we know that this bill and others like it has been litigated across the country. And actually, Grimm versus Gloucester County School Board found that misgendering a transgender student and denying them gender-affirming accommodations violates Title X. Also, we found that Whitaker versus the Kenosha Unified School District in the Seventh Circuit Court recognized that misgendering and denial of appropriate treatment as discrimination under Title X is illegal. So what really are we doing here? The supplemental note that was already issued states that this would open up school districts to lawsuits and other potential litigation. So are we really here to help teachers in the schools? I don't know. These were questions that came up for me. Thank you.
Thank you. And would you like to stand for questions?
Sure.
Okay. Like I said, no, never pressure, but I like to offer the opportunity. Do I have questions for our conferee? Representative McNorton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So a question you stated in one of the previous that conferees did, and this might be for Jason, but the student doesn't have to carry their birth certificate with them. This is about whether the parent will give them the name to call the student based off of a birth certificate sex or name. It doesn't mean that the child has to carry the birth certificate or show that to a teacher. Is that correct?
I'm happy to answer, but the way the bill is written, that's not clarified, which is why I brought it up as a scenario. But according to the bill right now, you will go by the name on the birth certificate. Well, who and how would that be verified? Is the parent submitting a birth certificate to the school staff, the cafeteria, the janitors? We don't know. And that's why I was highlighting how vague this bill is.
Madam Chair, could our revisor clarify, please?
Jason.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, the bill requires that without written permission from the parent to use a different name, then the teacher must use, their employee must use the name of the minor student that appears on the birth certificate or a derivative of that name. And so that documentation it would assume would be provided to the school district, but there is no requirement under the bill or under state law for such documentation to be provided to the school district at this time.
Are you done, Representative McNorton? Okay, and I think Representative Miller, thank you, may proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for being here today. I was hoping you could help me clarify a part of the something that you had mentioned. Under this bill, would the student have the right to privacy for their personal information that is contained in their birth certificate, whether it is required to be provided or not, that the information off of it? The reason I ask is if potentially a scenario where an intersex person wants to keep their private information private so that they don't have kind of a forced outing situation. Could you elaborate on that for me?
Under this bill, the student would not have access to privacy because if that same student would like to be called by their preferred name, then according to this, the teacher would have to refer to what's on the birth certificate. So in that point, the teacher has access to the birth certificate.
Yes, you may.
Please, thank you. Does that mean that, I guess my worry is a potential violation of privacy.
Absolutely.
So if it is required that they provide something stating what it is, could that be considered a violation of privacy?
Yes.
Thank you.
Representative McNorton for the second time.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, and this again may be for Jason, but when a child enrolls in school, whether it's kindergarten roundup or transfers from another state school district or whatever, is that child required at that time to provide a birth certificate or anything to be enrolled in school?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, I don't know of a state statutory requirement to provide a birth certificate for enrollment in public education?
I have it. It says that it must require presentation of proof of identity, which is not required to be a birth certificate. That's Kansas Statute 729934B.
I hear finger snapping, and that is not appropriate decorum. We've done a great job of having a really good discussion, very great questions, a lot of insight, and I'd like us to continue forward on a positive way. Yes, you may follow up,
Can you
Representative.
give me that statute again, please?
Sure, it's 729934B, and my research associate is in the other room, and I'm happy to verify that.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Any further questions for the conferee? Seeing none, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you.
Our next conferee is Rabbi Reber. Thank you for being with us again.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm Rabbi Moti Reber. I'm the Executive Director of Kansas Interfaith Action. We are a statewide interfaith advocacy organization. So I think this is like the third year that we've been working on bills like this. And every time, and after the election last year, we knew that the mood of the legislature had soured significantly, and that we were likely to get rolled over on some of these bills. And I look, and that's exactly what has happened. And I look at the proponents and the opponents of these bills, and 63 was an example. So you bring in people from out of town, from think tanks, from the Alliance Defending Freedom, from Kansas Voice, and you look at this room, and there's a bunch of people here who know that you're prejudiced against them, but they are here looking at you with open eyes.
Rabbi, I'm going to interrupt you. I usually really hate to interrupt a conferee. I don't make it a practice, but it is a practice and part of decorum in the legislature that we do not ascribe motive, and calling someone or anyone of us prejudiced is not appropriate. You may proceed, but please be very careful.
Just took 20 seconds off my time.
Happy to give it back to you.
I look at these people who come in here and look hopefully at the legislature and say, look at our lives, look at our families, look at the way that we actually live. And they just ask to be seen and they ask to be heard. And the decision is made before the hearing even starts. And that is so awful. I'm about to ascribe a negative motivation to people, so I won't. They plead with you not to ruin their lives, and you ignore them and legislate out of your self-righteousness. This bill legalizes bullying. There's no question about it. It gives permission for a student to bully a vulnerable student. The least respect that a student could expect or ask in this society is to be named their proper name or seen either by their proper pronouns, and to give permission for bullies in school to call people whatever they want, to call people by misnaming them, by misgendering them. This is a bullying act. This is a permission to bully act. This bill adds insult to the undoubted injury of SB 63. How much more do you want? How much more are you going to do? You've already ruined people's lives by forbidding them from getting gender-affirming care. Now you want to tell what they're called in school. How much insult are you going to add to the injury? This legislation will not stop any youth from being trans. There is no compelling reason, but it will prevent them from living the dignity-filled lives that they deserve and threaten any school employee who wants to affirm or support them. Putting vulnerable kids at risk with government authority. We should be on the side of the bullied and not on the bully's side. And the legislature certainly should not be the bullies. And in this case, they are. There is no compelling reason to pass this bill. It puts you on the wrong side. It's not good. I think it's a negative bill. It's an evil bill. It's a violation of the First Amendment rights of anyone who would affirm a child, or anyone. Actually, it legislates a particular understanding of how we interact with trans students. It legislates a particular right-wing Christian understanding of how we deal with LGBT students. And that is a violation of everybody else's freedom of religion and freedom of expression. I ask that you stop.
You're out of time. We did give you an extra 30 seconds. Thank you for being with us. Would you like to stand for questions?
Yes, I will stand for questions. I'm happy.
And this is the last warning to the overflow room. We do not applaud. We maintain decorum. Any questions for Rabbi? Seeing none, thank you, Rabbi. Our next conferee is Iridescent Rooney.
Thank you, members of the committee, for hearing me today. My name is Iridescent Rooney. I use she, they pronouns. I am a lifelong Kansan. I grew up in Kansas, and I also was part of our foster care system as well. Today, I would like to, I have my testimony printed. I know you all do too, and I was thinking about reading through it, but please read through it when you have time. Representative Schreiber earlier today shared some time with us at Equality Day and shared that we should share our story. So that's what I'm going to do today. I was born in Pratt, Kansas, and I've grown up in Kansas my entire life. I was adopted by my parents, who unfortunately I'm no longer in contact with them because they kicked me out of the house to be a teacher. They didn't want me to be a teacher. I hadn't come out to them because it wasn't safe. If this bill were to go through, it would force teachers, and I've gone through teaching training. I used to be a teacher. I moved away from teaching to work into higher education. I had to get a master's degree to do this because I was afraid that my rights and my ability to teach would be violated as a trans person. It wouldn't be safe. And I do have trans teachers and trans friends who are teachers in this state. Sorry, I'm trying to compose myself. This is really a lot. I did mention in my testimony that there are clear violations of the Constitution, as people have written. And one day I would like to have a kid, and I would like to raise my kid knowing that they're going to be safe. For me, my parents were abusive. Had I come out, or had I been told, had my school told me they're trans, they're gay, my dad would have beat me. My dad would have thrown me down the stairs, and I would have probably been sent to a conversion camp. This is a safety issue for students. It's not trying to hide things from parents. It's trying to keep students safe from abuse. And I have lived through that abuse. I'm sorry, my mouth is a little dry right now.
Would you like some water?
I'm fine. I've got a water bottle, but I'll get it afterwards. So, as I stated, I used to be a teacher, and I want to have a kid. What if I had a trans kid who went to the same school that I taught? What would that mean? Would I have to sit and watch and know that my colleagues are bullying my child? Or knowing that I can't step in and stop bullying of my child from another student? That violates my right as a parent. That violates the very sanctity of just being a human being. This is a very tense political time in our country, and I know that. I am the target, and I have been swatted. I have been stalked by hate groups that have spoken here today. So I ask that we please remember that this isn't an ideology. I don't have an idea that I am trans. I am trans. Sorry, my cane fell. So I ask you, please, to remember love, to remember kindness, and remember that we should teach kids the same, because this is teaching kids that it's okay to bully. And it's allowing teachers to do so as well. And that's where this bill started. Because the carrier of this bill purposely misgendered her colleague, Stephanie Byers, here and in Wichita. And this is where this stems. So if you truly want to pass legislation that makes you look like a fascist, this is the legislation to do that. Because the rest of the world, Australia, they look at us and they say America is turning into a fascist state. And if that doesn't set well with you, if you don't want to be called a Nazi later on in your life, then you should vote not like a Nazi, not like a fascist. I stand for questions. Thank you.
Any questions for our conferee? Thank you. Thank you for being with us today.
Trans rights are human rights. Trans rights are human
You are disturbing decorum. You are trespassing because I am asking you to leave. You have been asked to leave. You are disturbing decorum.
You do not need to touch me.
You are asked to leave. You are trespassing because you are disrupting decorum.
Fascist!
everybody else who has done a very, very good job of maintaining the decorum, I am sorry you had to experience that. I really want to give all of you a chance to be heard. So we will move right along. And Angie Powers, you are next.
Good afternoon. Chair Estes and members of the committee, I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Angie Powers, and I have been teaching in public schools for 25 years in Kansas. I'm also been the mother of a non-binary human for 24 years. About 3 weeks ago, I was able to provide testimony to the Senate Committee on Education on the same bill, and after the room cleared, I had a former student come up to me. I didn't immediately recognize them, but after they jogged my memory, they told me that when I had them, they weren't out because they were still figuring themselves out. But they knew that when they came into my classroom, everybody was welcome and they belonged. They told me it mattered to them more than I could ever have known at the time, and that's why I'm here again today. Senate Bill 76 doesn't make school a better learning environment for students. What it does is add government interference into things that educators and families are already trying to figure out together. It adds more paperwork, it adds more red tape, it adds more reasons for educators to be afraid to do the wrong thing, not because they aren't working with families, but because the rules keep shifting underneath them. A Spanish teacher who lets students pick a Spanish name, an educator calling a nickname that parents and students already have at home, suddenly these simple, everyday moments become bureaucratic hurdles. And when educators are buried in red tape, it takes away from the time and energy that we should be spending on the things that really matter: teaching, supporting students, communicating with families. Schools and parents don't need the state stepping in to tell us how to navigate these conversations. Does that mean these conversations are easy? It does not. But we will continue to figure it out because that's what communities do. This bill does not create conditions for students, educators, and families to have real conversations about a specific student's need. What it does is it creates confusion, fear, unnecessary barriers between the students and adults who are there to support them. Every student deserves a chance to feel like they belong at school. They deserve to focus on learning instead of worrying about whether or not they fit within somebody else's narrow definition of who they can be. This is why I urge you to vote no on Senate Bill 76. Thank you for your consideration. I stand for questions.
Questions for our conferee? Representative Schreiber.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Ms. Powers. My question is, I've heard a few times, not necessarily in this discussion here, but that this use of not understanding which pronoun to use for a student would make it extremely difficult for teachers. And as your experience, 25 years, I think you said, as a teacher, how would you respond to that? Is it a difficult, or would it be a difficult thing for teachers to manage?
I think meeting students' needs every day is a challenging task, but that's what educators are up to do.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Any other questions for our conferee? Seeing none, Angie, thank you for being with us today. We are going to move to Rachel McDaniel.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson and committee members. I'm so grateful to have the opportunity to be with you today. My name is Rachel McDaniel, and I'm a fifth-generation Kansan. And I'm also, I probably do, yes, that'd be great. I'm also a licensed specialist clinical social worker in the state of Kansas, and I hold certificates in conflict mediation and trauma therapy. I also have the privilege of working with transgender people every day. And I forgot to mention, I am also the valedictorian of a Christian seminary. And so I start my thoughts with the ordained minister, John Ross Macduff, when he said, "Prejudice is the conjurer of imaginary wrongs, strangling truth, overpowering reason, making strong people weak and weak people weaker." What this bill does is prejudice as a social worker and an expert on prejudice, when we are adding more steps and more barriers, we are making it harder for the weakest members of our society. And most importantly, I need to speak for the children that could die as a result of this bill. Trauma is defined in so many ways, and the way that has impacted me the most in my work has been when you are not safe to be in your own skin, that is trauma. And so when we are making it unsafe for a transgender child, when we are making it unsafe for a person of color to be themselves, they are traumatized, and that raises their risk of death by suicide. Over half of all deaths by suicide are from trauma, and this bill threatens to traumatize the citizens of our great state. I love being a Kansan, and I would like to continue to be a Kansan. I would like to be a parent, but bills like this make me not want to be a parent. And I finish with the quote from Montesquieu. As a therapist, I love quotes. And this is a man who inspired our founding fathers. An injustice committed against anyone is a threat to everyone. And I would like you to consider this prejudice and this injustice in this bill and the way that it will kill and harm the people in your communities. I will stand for questions. Thank you so much.
Questions for our conferee? Seeing none, Rachel, thank you for being with us today. We will move along to Joanna Herman. Joanna Herman, thank you. Please come in.
Good afternoon. Thank you for taking the time to listen to people who oppose this bill. It is my understanding that elected officials serve their constituents and act on their behalf, so it is important to hear these stories here today. My ex-husband and I, and all three of our children, were born here in Kansas. For the last 25 years, I have lived in Lawrence. Lawrence has provided my children with an idyllic childhood filled with safe and happy memories. My ex-husband and I were strong Christians. We oversaw ministries, led groups, we taught people the Bible. As you can imagine, it was pretty shocking when our youngest child, a boy, started showing signs that he was very different. We kept excusing it as a phase, since we weren't supposed to have one of those kids. After all, we were the ones who were doing everything right. As the years passed, the behaviors only increased in intensity. As young as 3 years old, we were having to tell our child that they were not a girl. We repeated countless times, "You are a boy. God made you a boy, and God doesn't make mistakes." Once I finally began to truly listen and see my child for what she was, I realized if I'm telling my child that God made her and God doesn't make mistakes, and she continues to feel the way that she does, that means I am telling my child that she is clearly not the creation of God, and therefore she is the mistake. I am proud to say today that my daughter is healthy, happy, and a vibrant girl who quite literally spreads sunshine everywhere she goes. This bill makes no sense. Since when have laws been created to police the names that people go by? Why is there such a push to control this community, to strip away my rights as a parent and the rights of our teachers and educators to create a safe learning environment for all children? No one knows my child better than I do. You are stripping away every form of protection from the most vulnerable of children. This, to me, is sick and disgusting. There is another name for people who are obsessed with the genitalia of children. They are called pedophiles. And you are more concerned with what is or isn't between a child's legs than protecting them. You are passing these laws based on fear and control. How incredibly weak of you. I also love how people want to make this bill about parents' rights. Where are my rights as a parent? You want me to have rights when it comes to the name of my child, but you don't want me to have rights when it comes to their health care? I don't get any rights for that. Somebody else had mentioned keeping families together. I am currently in the position where I might have to move away from the state of Kansas that I love to protect my child, because she won't be safe here anymore with her being removed from anti-bullying policies, and she certainly won't be able to continue on her journey in life, which would then force me to leave my 2 oldest children here in the
you are
state,
out of
so we would be
time.
separated.
Did you want to stand for questions, Joanna?
Certainly.
Do we have questions for our conferee? Seeing none, Joanna, thank you for being with us today. We will move on to Taryn Jones. Taryn Jones. There you are, Taryn, thank you. That's okay, I didn't see you. My view was blocked. It's nice to have you back again. You may begin when you're ready.
Hi, Chair Estes and other members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Taryn, and I am the Policy Director for Equality Kansas. I will keep my remarks brief because we've had so many amazing people up here testifying about their experiences. I just want to say that Equality Kansas has been in the State House for 20 years now, and we will hopefully be here for another 20 years. Unfortunately, we have not had the opportunity to provide a lot of good legislation for people here in our state on LGBTQ Kansans. We had Equality Day today where we all gathered in the State House to celebrate ourselves. And you know, while we have all these bills going around, we still want to find joy, and we still hope that we can find joy in the little places and find, hopefully, legislation in the future that will protect us rather than harm us. I just want to say that SB 76 is a harmful bill. It takes away free speech. It puts teachers and school staff in a very difficult position. Making teachers dead name their own students is harmful not only to the students' mental health, but also to the relationship between the students and teachers. School is already difficult enough with school shootings and bullying, and children coming to school hungry, not fed, with other problems at home. Do we really want to make teachers' jobs harder? Teachers are already leaving the field due to pay and stress of the job. Let's not make their lives harder and make it more difficult for us to find quality teachers. In conclusion, I am here asking you to vote no on SB 76. Thank you, and I will stand for questions.
Questions for our conferee? Seeing none, Taryn, thank you for being with us
Thank
again.
you, Chair Estes.
Laurel Birchfield is not here, and I believe Michael Papa was her substitute. Michael, you're welcome to come to the podium, and I hope I remembered your name correctly. I apologize if I did not.
No apology necessary. Almost. Michael Popa, Executive Director of Mainstream Coalition and Mainstream Civic Engagement, and Chair, members of the committee, thanks for the opportunity to speak before you today. Mainstream opposes SB 76. We were founded over 30 years ago, and since then, our members have been fighting to protect religious freedom and maintain strong church-state separation in Kansas, because we value our freedom to live freely without the overreach of government or religion into our personal lives. Earlier, Chair, you stated that this was not personal, and I'm not ascribing any meaning or motive, but it is very personal for a lot of people. It's very personal for these kids that are in the room today, that are looking to you to do the right thing, that have the courage to come, and some of them are going to be speaking in front of you. And they know that, unfortunately, you don't care about them, or it seems you don't care about them. I want to ask a question. Obviously, it's rhetorical unless someone wants to answer. I want to know why a majority of this legislature is obsessed with genitalia. I need to echo that sentiment, that question. I mean, just the other day, it was a couple weeks ago, I forget which representative it was, but she stood down at the well, introduced a freshman legislator, and they talked about her sex life for about 5 minutes. I was appalled that this happened, when you could have been talking about, lowering taxes for Kansans. Could have been talking about giving rights, not taking rights. You talk about written permission from parents. You talk about birth certificates. We still don't know how that's going to work. I have an idea. Instead of carrying a birth certificate around, you could give all of the trans or queer kids pink triangles. Because that's how this feels. Especially with the national conversation, the national politics, this bill is terrifying. I don't care about pronouns. And I mean no disrespect to anyone. That's not what this is about. This is about a larger overreach of a very, very narrow, extreme religious sect and religious views that are being pushed onto a majority of United States residents, a majority of Kansas residents. So I stand here before you today and I ask you, please leave your religion at the door and vote with your heads. Vote with your hearts. Do what you're supposed to do, please. And stop this bill. Protect Kansans, especially the least among us. Thank you.
You're welcome. Did you want to stand for questions, Michael?
If there are any questions, I'm happy to try to answer.
Thank you. Any questions for our conferee? Seeing none, Michael, thank you for being with us today. And I believe you're also a return guest, so thank you for coming back again. Our next conferee is Molly Stevenson. Welcome, Molly.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair, Madam Chairwoman, and committee members. My name is Molly Stevenson. I'm the co-founder and secondary guide at Wildflower Community School. We are a small independent school in Wichita that serves primarily neurodivergent learners in grades K to 12. I'm here with some of my students today. We came for Equality Day. I'm here to voice concerns about...
Molly, I'm sorry to interrupt you. If you could get a little closer to the mic. Some people online are not able to hear you.
No worries.
Thank you.
I'm here to voice concerns and center the mental health and well-being of the students that are in our schools and classrooms. I've heard a lot about free speech and rights today. I've heard very little about the rights and the well-being of the students. And I want to take an opportunity to bring some focus to that and to share some empirical research with you all so it's on the record. I'm a very fortunate person in that our small community is very diverse. We have gender expansive students, family members. We've had the privilege of really getting to know and experience what life has been like for them to this point. Many of our families have experienced hostile, negative, and just otherwise toxic school experiences in the past. It grieves us, it makes us sad. We feel like it is our sacred task as educators to create a safe space for our students to thrive. It is the responsibility of the legislature to make sure that policies in Kansas are going to support that well-being for those students. So on that note, I want to share some evidence from the American Medical Association in a policy brief, had a nice little summary. Academic and medical research has shown that gender expansive youth, which includes about 100,000 teenagers across the country, okay, so that's not a giant number, right? Encounters severe discrimination in the school environment. 78% were discriminated against at school. Over 75% reported symptoms of generalized anxiety disorder within the past 2 weeks of the study. 60% of them engaged in self-harm. 40% were physically threatened or harmed because of their gender identity. 20% attempted suicide within the previous year. These students were also more than 1.5 times more likely to be bullied actively at school. Research shows that with supportive environments, these numbers normalize to the rate of their peers. They're healthier. We know that in Kansas, school mental health is not great. We rank 33rd in the nation in school mental health data. That has slid from 8 in the nation in 2015. We deserve to do better by our students. Thanks. I'll stand for questions.
Thank you. Do we have questions for our conferee? Seeing none, Molly, thank you for being with us today. Ash White. Welcome, Ash. You may begin.
Thank you, Chairwoman and committee members. My name is Ash White, and I'm a student at Wildflower Community School, and I would like to speak out against SB 76. This bill targets those of the trans community in a way that is potentially harmful to our mental and physical health. Being addressed as who we are is a must in order to live our true lives. As someone who goes by a different name and pronouns than I was assigned at birth, I ask you to think about the fact that we are more than what a piece of paper says we are. Look past the papers and see in what you see on the outside, and look on what's on the inside of a person, and let us live our true lives. Thank you. I'll stand for questions.
Do we have questions for our conferee? See none. Ash, thank you for being with us.
Thank you for your time.
Ava Glancy. Welcome, Ava.
Thank you, Chairwoman and committee members. My name is Eva Glancy. I'm a student at Wildflower Community School in Wichita, and I'm surrounded by a very beautiful LGBTQ plus community. And so I'm here today to voice my concerns about SB 76. I've never understood why people, especially those in power, want so much to do with what people do and how they want to be called, and especially what they have in their pants. The so-called land of the free pretends to be free while things like this take place that take away people's individuality and self-expression. SB 76 will take away students' right to be called by a name and pronouns that they have chosen for themselves. Thank you. I will stand for questions.
Any questions for our conferee today? Seeing none. Ash, Ava, thank you for being with us today. Quincy Rowley. Welcome, Quincy.
Hi. Thank you, Chairwoman and committee members. My name is Quincy Rowley, and I am a student at Wildflower Community School. I oppose SB 76 because passing this bill removes people's freedom of expression through preferred names and pronouns. Also, pronouns is a very vague topic because you and I are both considered pronouns, so you would have to have permission to use, teachers would have to have permission to use those. But back on topic. This is a problem because suicide rate for the transgender community is 18 to 45%. One of the easiest ways to lower this number is to just call transgender people what they would like to be called. That's just how you support them, by using their preferred name or pronoun. I urge you to not pass SB 76. Thank you for your time. I will stand for questions.
Do we have questions for our conferee? All right, thank you so much, Quincy. You look like you might have been a little nervous, but you did a good job. And that is the end of our testimony. And the compliment I gave to Quincy goes to her two predecessors who were also students. I think it is not easy to come and stand in front of a bunch of adults, and you guys handled yourselves very, very well. That concludes our testimony for today. I cannot think of anything else that I was supposed to announce, but I feel like there was something. My vice chair and I have a different list. He sees Sarah Brinker, but I don't have something from Sarah. Sarah, did I accidentally overlook you? I apologize. Thank you, Representative McNorton. Please go right on ahead.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak. My name is Sarah Bricker, and I'm a public school educator and a parent of a trans child in Decatur County, Oberlin. Today, I urge you to vote no on SB 76. When our school district began using our child's preferred name and pronouns, we noticed a huge change in our child. And I remember his teacher coming to me within a day, and she was shocked at the instant boost of confidence and self-esteem my child had just because they recognized his name and pronouns. As an educator, students' basic needs include safety, which must be met in order to learn. Putting something between an educator and their students feeling safe causes harm and interferes with the student's ability to thrive and learn. First, legislators have taken away our child's access to medical care and Kansas kids throughout the state. And now we're attacking the very dignity of our trans youth. We've seen what happens when a government tries to erase a marginalized group time and time again. And that's not the side of history we want to be on, and I want to know when these bills are going to stop. These bills will not make my child or other trans children any less trans, but it strips them of their rights as a child of the United States. This bill violates my child's right to privacy and equality. Transgender youth deserve their freedom of speech and expression just like everyone else in this country. They deserve an education where they are treated with respect and decency, and they deserve a school that is safe and welcoming to all. I urge you to vote no on SB 76, and I'll stand for question.
Questions for our conferee? Seeing none, thank you for being with us. And Sarah, again, I apologize that my list was not complete. I'm going to throw it out there. Is there anybody who did submit testimony that I may have accidentally overlooked? I don't want to leave anybody out. I don't hear anything from the other room or the hallway, so I think that we are good. I really appreciate, I think overwhelmingly the majority of people here today participated in a very good discussion and took a lot of time to make a lot of good points. Again, I apologize for those who did not behave with the proper decorum because that distracts from what you were trying to say. And I really do appreciate you being here today. And with that, I close the hearing. Is there anything else for the good of the order? Seeing none, we are adjourned.